Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Gyanamurtim Dandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattva Shadi Laksham Ekam Nicham Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tannamami. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. We salute the leader of our souls, through whose grace our ignorance is dispelled, who is beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, life and death, and all other pairs of opposites. We recognize that one is the only witness to the changing phenomena of this universe. May we through that grace go beyond darkness and delusion, and realize the truth in this very life. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat. This morning we meet for what will end up being the last satsang live stream that we will have for some month or so while we are away from the Hawaii ashram on the mainland to do Durga Puja at two other locations, one in San Francisco and one in Portland, Oregon. So that's October is a very big month for Navaratri, Divine Mother worship, 9 days and 9 nights of worshiping Mother Durga. And so this will be our final live streaming satsang until November. And we also have a live streaming class this afternoon, which will wrap up our series called Gaudapada's Non-Touch Yoga, or the Advaita Yoga of India. And that will soon be ready for viewing on our website as we get around to rendering it into something you can look back on. But we hope you join us live for these events, and that we build up a following for this kind of thing. This is Satsang going on now. We've just had our 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. meditation here in the Hawaiian Islands at our ashram. And now we're going to move into morning satsang. Satsang, at least as far as SRV is concerned, and also the Vedanta Society that I was trained in with Swami Seshanandaji Maharaj, happened at about dusk. So it was always around 6 or 7 p.m. that we gathered for that. Or Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when I can no longer see the hairs on my arms, then I know it's time to sit for meditation and have satsang. So that satsang, of course, is self-inquiry, inquiry into the nature of the self. The true self, although I would say looking into the nature of the not-self is also very important to the whole process. One's called neti neti, not this, not this. The other's called iti iti, all this, all this. And some of these questions that have come in today, which I just got 10 or 15 minutes to glance at before we went went live, are again sort of tussling with that same question. These higher dualities of form and formlessness, and the apparent dichotomies between paths like action and inaction, meditation and karma yoga, and jnana and bhakti. That's for those of you who don't know those words, that's wisdom, devotion. These apparent dichotomies that come along that we have to juxtapose next to one another and blend so that we learn the art of integration and how to synthesize well on the spot, even as things come to us. It makes us much more effective as far as the art of everyday living goes, when you can not be taken by surprise by everything that Maya, the world of name and form and time and space, based in cause and effect, will throw at you. So satsang is a time where everything is thrown at me. All of these questions come at me, and I have to see what I can do to answer them. So let's take a few of them up, and we'll see what kind of answers come forth from Mother of Wisdom, who resides within us, has that very power to know, the power to engage in spiritual practice and its concomitants, like Atma-vichara, inquire into the nature of the self. Well, let's start out with a few of these questions. I see there's quite a few, and sometimes some come in live. You can send them in live too if you are inspired to do so. We'll see if we can get to some of these, because there are a number of them today. Let's take this one first. How can a spiritual aspirant differentiate between the following three: laziness / aversion to worldly duties, contentment, and world-weariness? Well, actually, you just did differentiate between the three, so let's move on. No. He wants a little bit more definitive answer than that, I'm sure. I would say laziness / aversion to worldly duties is sort of tamas and rajas mixed. And contentment is sattva. And in the first you feel bad about yourself, and the second you feel very good about yourself. But world-weariness, you don't feel anything at all. So that has to be rather transcendent. That is, world-weariness is neither good nor bad, nor good and bad, nor neither. If it's taken rightly, world-weariness is a very healthy thing. It doesn't appear to be healthy to your parents when you start going through it, or to your friends when you start entering spiritual life. When your task is done and you let karma float everything away, as Vivekananda says, and you leave the arena of work and you get into the introspective yoga, that is more like knowledge and meditation together, jnana and dhyana, we call it. So when you're in that kind of a blend, it's an introspective, contemplative temperament you're looking at. And it's that side of yourself which has come up, which is very important. It's the inner life that Christ wanted fishermen along the rivers to have, and other great souls like him who came along tried to interest their devotees or in spiritual life, or bring out those hidden tendencies in them, like oil out of sesame seed. We say it's just such an active world, and so few are given to meditation. How rare it is, and even study of scripture, and probably even real bhakti, because going to church, as we've come to find out, isn't really enough, doesn't really necessarily inspire us in the tradition of bhakti, which is, as we saw in Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, crying tears for God. He was yearning, and very intensely. It doesn't matter who was looking on. He was doing it in front of the whole world, and yet he wasn't even aware of the world. So these aspects of our nature have to be brought out. There are higher qualities, there are spiritual attributes, and so world-weariness is a very healthy thing. But so I don't get too far afield there, I would say that one is tamas and rajas mixed, and then one is sattva, and the other is beyond the gunas. World-weariness can be beyond the gunas. As I said, it may not look like that way even to you. You're wondering, why don't I have the same verve and the same for work, and why don't I have this tendency towards plunging in? But you'll see that day to day that changes too. The whole point really is to have that contentment. If the contentment is real and long abiding, like Samo and Dhammo, they say, two of the 6 treasures or jewels of Vedanta, inner peace and self-control, then that inner peace is that kind of contentment you're looking for, which will make world-weariness seem healthy to you. You'll know why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and you can inspect it, just like right now we're inspecting these questions. So differentiate between the three. You've done that here nicely. Then to meditate on each one independently, so that you know them and you recognize them when they rise up in you. You can deal with them. And hopefully you can do that all from contentment. That is, if you have a sort of aversion to your worldly duties in any given day, you can ask inside of yourself, because the Lord exists within you, please help this contentment return so I can do my work as worship. I can labor as love. These are expressions we borrow from the great Swami Vivekananda. Work as worship, labor as love. So we want to make sure that we awaken every day, nitya sarga, with that kind of beautiful, conscious atmosphere around us. And we can set that up the night before by falling asleep doing our mantra, or ending with the evening, a whole day with meditation, so you can reflect back on the whole day, which is not meditation's grandest purpose by any means, but it is helpful for the active person and the person who's dealing with difficulties in their life at any given time. Almost the pat answer for any kind of question of that nature is wait, be patient, along with perseverance and patience and striving for purity, the 3 Ps we call it. Very important to be an observer, right? To sakshi bhutam, to witness all the phenomena around you and not necessarily engage, especially emotionally all the time, in what's going on. So you keep that kind of witness consciousness, and it's not callousness, it's just very wise to be balanced, that's all. It's economical for your energy, for your prana, it's good for your health then, isn't it? Even your physical health, what to speak of, you're looking for spiritual health along the way eventually. So that observership, that witness consciousness as we call it, must last over cycles. For the seers it lasts over yugas. They are going to witness a whole march of beings come into and leave, manifested and unmanifested prakriti we call it, from their witness consciousness station, if they're working with the consciousness of the individual beings on earth or in the heavens like the ancestors. There are souls that oversee those great pools, oceans of souls that are abiding and trying to better themselves, trying to transcend the grinding process of Maya, the samsaras going on and on. They've reached that balance and mastered it. They're masters or past masters, we call them. And they're trying to pass that on to the rest of us. So in that way, strive for that sattva. Sattva, contentedness as you say it here, is a default zone every time. It's not the highest, but it's the best of all modes of nature. Because then things that come at you that are of the nature of tamas and rajas, that is slothfulness, laziness, and restlessness and frenetic activity that spins the wheels and gets you nowhere, can be balanced out, and you can resolve them in sattva. And then if you stay in sattva long enough, contentment and balance, if you make that an art form, and that's your default zone, as I say, and you won't deviate from that, then this healthy world-weariness will come to you. Everything that you saw as aversion before, all of a sudden you'll say, oh, I see why I was averse to that, because it's unreal. And I can use that, see? And then everything begins to be paid forward, as they say. You can bring it all back into one state of consciousness, which it is. Guess what? That's what it is. Take the outside, take the inside, render them into one state, meditate upon them, pass your time contentedly, and be free, as Shankara put it in the Viveka Chudamani. So there, a few minutes spent on fleshing out, as it were, this differentiation between these 3 gunas, or these 3 modes, as it's put here. Now the next question is, and we were just talking about it, at the time of death, what exactly goes into unmanifested prakriti? Is it body, ego, dual mind, soul, or something else? Well, in India, just to warm up the topic, they've always seen prakriti, nature, we call it, as having a manifested side and an unmanifested side. And unfortunately, in the West, we only see the manifested side. That is, when anything disappears or dissolves or goes into abeyance, as we say in our tradition, we think it died, or we think it went back to non-existence. Non-existence is actually one of the proofs of existence, which we will be talking about at the forthcoming retreat at the Wind River next month, if you want to join us. But whatever the case may be, this idea of where things go, like even such questions as what happens to the soul after death, or what happens to the world after, it goes to an end, or when the world ends, as it were, as they say. Does it just go into a void? Where did it come from? Did it come out of a void? That's kind of the answer to the question, isn't it? If it goes into a void, or if you go into a void afterwards, then you must have come out of that void. If there's a going, then there must have been a coming. So you're just returning to a source. So whether you put that in physical terms, or energy terms, or consciousness terms, thought and intelligence terms, you pretty much have the same answer, don't you? That there is an unmanifested state for things. And you just need to inspect it. And that's what you're not doing tonight in deep sleep. Because that's the very state of your consciousness, called the third state of your awareness, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, that your witness consciousness goes away. You want to keep your witness consciousness active there, just like you did when you were in a contented waking state. That sattva has to be taken deep within you and utilized. So inspecting one's deep sleep is not that easy, as we know. You tend to lose track of your consciousness. Well, that's sort of the point. You lose track of your lower awareness, but there's a higher awareness that's there. Call it a void if you want, an emptiness, or a great light, a great formless light, bliss, a great formless bliss that there's no ego there to enjoy. You're just like a salt doll. You just walked into the ocean and you became your own essence. Now you want to do that in consciousness, so that's why we practice meditation, and that's why I just said that's the greater use for meditation, is to learn how to absorb yourself, to merge into your own true nature. And you'll find out, back towards the question, that everything is tending towards unmanifested Prakriti. Like Swami Vivekananda said, the minute we're born, we're rushing towards death. That's a pretty stark statement, but isn't it true? Everything that comes into form is rushing back towards formlessness the minute it appears. And you just wait a while, stand around and watch it, and you'll see it disappear. But you'll also see it come back again if you wait long enough. It's the cycle. And it's that particular cycle that Lord Buddha wanted off, and other great souls. So they sat, meditated a long time till they saw where it all came from, and they sat equally as long to see where it all goes to. And this coming and going, as Vivekananda said later, is really all non-actual. You get the feeling as you watch it that you're the observer. That's enlightenment. When you really come full circle, beyond circles and cycles, you just sit there and you see the coming and going of a thing, and then you say to yourself, well, that's really all going on in my own consciousness. It seems like it's going on externally, and it seems like it's going on internally, and these two are switching off back and forth like humans and ancestors. It happens with everything, bodies, you say here, minds, egos. The only thing it doesn't happen with is the soul, because the soul here is capitalized, uppercase, you see. If you had to put a small s there, I would have said yes, the ego, that's the soul, the ego-mind mechanism, that also goes to unmanifested Prakriti and comes back. That is, it goes into a state of not knowing, abhava, and then it keeps its personality traits there locked somewhere back inside. We differ a bit with the Buddhists in that case. And then it manifests those personality traits again in another lifetime. Everything is held back in abeyance, like seeds. And then they're strewn again like paddy before the rainy season, you see, and all these growths come out of it. So that bit of knowledge called the unmanifested side of Prakriti is something to add to your spiritual repertoire. You want to have that knowledge because it satisfies all the relative questions. All the penultimate questions you have pretty much will be satisfied. All those questions that people are talking, why, where, when, what, those 4 W's, all those questions get answered when you just take a look inside of yourself and see these cycles of coming and going happening all inside of you. Kingdoms of heaven are within you. Another nice interpretation for that saying. And then pretty soon, if you watch that enough, you see there's a stable foundation here. There's a witness looking on, and that's me. That's me with a capital M. That's soul with a capital S. And no, that doesn't go into abeyance and come out into manifestation again. It's always there. Now, with tongue-in-cheek, you might say, yeah, we should manifest more of that soul. So that's a matter of practice. Like this question here came in. Says, lately I have heard you quote from St. John, who said, "No man hath ever seen God at any time." How can we understand this in relation to Sri Ramakrishna, who declared that we have never seen anything but God? Brahman would be the word for God in Vedanta. So one is a matter of truth. You see, a statement of truth. That is, one's coming from a person who has realized that God is not a form. It just manifests in a form. Most of us, that is, all of us, are that one divine reality. How could it be anything other? That's non-dualistic thinking, you see, Advaitic thinking. But are we conscious of our oneness when we come into this realm of two-ness and manyness? That's the real problem or the real consideration. Beings like Sri Ramakrishna, of course, they're avatars, we call them, divine incarnations, divine descents. And they're always, they've developed that witness consciousness to a T. That's their cup of tea, you see. They want that and nothing else. Seek thee first the kingdom, all else will be added unto thee. Thou art that. Those kinds of sayings are there. So they took that seriously when they first heard it, if there ever was a first hearing of it, because everything is non-originated, you see. So they were always focused in that one stable consciousness out of which everything springs and into which everything merges again. And they had all the plateaus or the echelons, kingdoms of heaven inside, based in different vibration. They had that all in their third eye sight. And they knew they were the observer looking on, and even sometimes they would even merge that observer in a very high state called nirvikalpa. There's a question here about that I'll get to. So it's a matter of the truth when you say no man has seen God at any time. Now when you come to a position like, how can we understand this in relation to Ramakrishna, and we could say Swami Vivekananda too, because that statement is really more popular to him, because somebody asked him when he came to the West, have you ever seen God, Swamiji? And he said, I've seen nothing but God ever since I opened my eyes. And so have you. You've seen nothing but God also. So that's the idea that all of this is a manifestation of Brahman. All is Brahman. When you say that, you don't say the form is Brahman, or you'd be transgressing that law that God cannot be formed. Nature cannot form consciousness. It seems to have. But how many beings are conscious of that? When they do become conscious of it, then they give it up. You see, they go back to consciousness, which is formless. So again, you're waking and you're dreaming, you're playing with form. When you go into deep sleep, you give it up, don't you? It's as natural as anything. So where is your consciousness at any given time? If you have a consciousness that knows everything's formless to begin with, and that then you can say, without any qualms or without any doubts, no man has ever seen God at any time. God is not a form. But if you have consciousness awakened in you, and it's fully refined, and you're focused on it, like I was just saying, these superlative souls that do focus on it 100%, then everywhere you look is nothing but that Brahman. But even then you make a distinction, you say, there's Brahman with qualities. Now let me shut my eyes and visit Brahman without qualities. See? Now when I shut my eyes, to go back to the question before that, I must make sure that I don't just go into unmanifested prakriti or deep sleep and consider that to be formless Brahman. There's a big problem there, you see. It's very, very subtle. Some people even close their eyes and say, I'm energy now. And that's also a problem, because you can't, prana is a flow. It moves, so it cannot be Brahman. You have certain rules of thumb, thumbs up, certain rules of thumb, see, in Vedanta, especially in Advaita Vedanta, by which you don't transgress or breach these laws. If you make the distinction between manifested nature, unmanifested nature, which is all form taken into its seed form, abeyance we call it, and the supremely unmanifested, which is the light of Brahman, the ocean of consciousness, then you have a Triputi that's worth meditating on. See, manifested nature, unmanifested nature, these are cycling. Now, what about the supreme witness behind it all? That supremely unmanifested soul. That's not nature at all, is it? That's Purusha. It's not Prakriti, it's Purusha. It's not the world, it's Atman. And then you're staying true to the precepts of and axioms of Advaita Vedanta. So when you pose beautiful duality like that in a question, that's how you reason it out in Vedanta. You see, one is by way of a statement of ultimate truth, the other is by way of practice, or by way of vision, or by way of transformation. One is going to be the absolute truth, the other is going to be a way of expressing it here, within the body-mind mechanism, with the five senses, and as we said earlier, through the ego mechanism and through the mind and through the intelligence. Those are all stations of awareness, but they're not awareness itself. Simply put, awareness or consciousness does not need a station to stand on. It is the source of all other stations. That is, ego, mind, intellect, cosmic mind even, all of those are stations which consciousness will come and occupy. Just like you had a set of satellite stations out in space to get to a far distant planet. Someone was telling me recently that they came upon a planet that was such of a huge size that would it take days to travel around it in a rocket ship? No. Would it take months? No. Would it take years? No. Would it take centuries? No. It would actually take millennia to travel around this planet in a spaceship. That's how big the planet is, you see. So that was awe-inspiring. You see, wow, what grandeur, even in the physical nature. So how much more grand then the unmanifested Prakriti out of which a planet like that came, out of which all planets came. That is their formless side, their formless insentient side. Because nature is all insentient. People don't understand that yet. They want so much to make the sun sentient and the rain sentient and the ocean sentient. Well, it's got sentient things in it, you see, to different degrees. But as long as they're attached to the form, then they're not awakened to sentiency with an uppercase S, soul with an uppercase S. Atman, we call it, Paramatman. So a good question there in just one sentence, we can find out and dive into nature as a way of using Atmic inquiry, see, to distance ourselves, to separate ourselves from nature. Father of Yoga called that koivoya. We must get a divorce from nature at some time, just like we do every night in deep sleep anyway, so don't make such a big thing of it. Nature will always be there. It'll go flowing on and on. So I need to keep moving here. It takes too much time to answer every little question, and we don't get to all the rest of the questions. Let's see here. We have this question about service. I feel a need to integrate karma yoga into sadhana. It's already integrated there. Spending too much time inactive and alone magnifies tamasic tendencies. No, inactiveness is beautiful. Aloneness is beautiful. We're just talking about world-weariness. You should transform that attitude. Say, oh, this is all beautiful. I have this time alone, and I'm going to now make the most out of the action of inaction, meditation inside of myself. And tamasic tendencies will go away. I feel that volunteer service would keep me on a higher plane of awareness. No, that actually brings you down to a lower plane of awareness. I'm being a little bit devil's advocate here, sorry. Since I have a very strong tendency toward bhakti, that's devotion, I could imagine being in service to my ishtam. Well, better than imagine, you should envision it. That is karma yoga. By being totally true to your Atman, then even without even leaving your door, to enter into any sort of altruistic action or whatever, you're doing the best good to the world, just by knowing your own Atman and serving your ishtam inside. But how else might I augment the effectiveness of what I do? How might I sift principles of jnanam, wisdom, in, for example, and what basic attitudes should I hold to? This is, of course, a question of, so we were just talking about inaction and action. When a person gets too inactive, then they feel, I should go out and be more active. I'm missing out on things, or maybe I'm one-sided. I'm a good meditator, but I have to test that in the fires of activity, you see, to make sure that I'm many-sided. Vivekananda wanted us to perfect all four yogas, not just cling to the one that we're good at. And that's a well-rounded spiritual person. But to answer the last question there, which is the best one, what basic attitude should I hold to? There's only one attitude you hold to. I am Atma Brahma. This self is Brahman. You know yourself to be that. I am that. Thou art that. In everything you do. And if you can hold that, even in action, then that's a very great attainment. So whatever you do, you say, as it were, I do nothing. The Lord is compelling me to do this action. and whether my work overflow with full fruition or with none, doesn't matter. I am simply the Atman, and the Atman is essentially inactive. Now, when I manifest that wisdom, as you're saying, how can I sift principles of wisdom in? Yes, you should. You should study the scriptures and then test them in the fires of activity, whether it be just the activity of your everyday life, around the kitchen, around the bedroom, around the living room. Even if you live alone, you see, you're testing yourself in all those ways. And what comes up is your challenge, how you deal with it, and how you resolve it. Things are difficult sometimes, even when you're living alone. Then when you're out with other people, if you go out and engage in karma yoga and service, then you're going to put a finer point on that, no doubt. But you have to be very strong in order to do that too, because you don't want to get pulled away from your center. So this balance of action and inaction has been stated by Sri Krishna in the Gita as a very fine art, very difficult to complete, to mature, to refine. But it's very worthy of the effort, very worthy of the effort. So he mentions three of the yogas here in this question. You see, karma, bhakti, and jnanam. And the only thing that isn't mentioned is meditation. So that's your alone time, I would say. Make that alone time sacrosanct. Don't ever think of it as being tamasic. That time alone based on world-weariness, if you will, is meditation. And that's, like you say, a very rare thing. If you have a tendency to go into meditation and you like to be there, that's a very positive aspect of your being. You're very fortunate. We wish more people would ground things out, even things out, and balance things out with meditation. Then they wouldn't go out the next day full of stress, full of violence, ready to go off fly off the handle and commit acts of unconsciousness, see, of lower consciousness. So a good set of sentences there, all which had answers, but basically that one attitude you hold to through it all, I am Atma Brahma, this self is Brahman. Whether I'm acting, whether I'm not acting, whether I'm studying the scriptures, or whether I'm doing my devotions to my ishtam, all of that has to be done in that one Advaitic atmosphere, which I said here is inactive and alone in most cases. That's where you go inside and inspect yourself. Here we're inspecting it outwardly a bit, but then you take this wisdom inside and inspect it in your own time, quietly, deeply, and that's going to be very, very good. Make for a healthy spiritual life. What other questions here in our time? One says, this was a little more technical, in the highest state of aparavairagya, we have vaishikara, a state where one has gained dispassion and complete disinterest in the enjoyment. When one has paravairagya, supreme detachment, there are accounts in our tradition of the enjoyment or bliss that accompanies such a station. We see in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, for instance, that a mart of joy surrounded the Master. Can you speak of where and how enjoyment and bliss becomes free of attachment with respect to the states of aparavairagya and paravairagya? All right, well, it'll probably come to the 2:30 class today, because one of the charts I'm showing is titled that. Paravairagya and aparavairagya. And so it shows how one moves in states from lower detachment to middling detachment to higher detachment to supreme detachment, which is just a quick English rundown of these terms that some of you might not be familiar with or need to be reminded about. Also, how bliss dies away is very good. It's not really a big part of the Vedanta. It is not really spoken of a lot, and although a lot of the monks have the last name Ananda, which is bliss, as we often say. But as far as how that bliss manifests, comes, and by degrees, and especially how it goes away when one reaches a non-dual state, is more a yogic topic. Right? That is, Father of Yoga has defined it very nicely. You want to know how attachment to bliss goes away, if that's what I'm reading here, is basically when you reach the Sananda and Sasmita levels of lower samadhi, it's called. Sampragyata, seated samadhi. You have this still attended by the sense of a ripened ego and the sense of bliss with you. And it's your bliss, and you're having that great feeling of bliss. But there's a sort of turn of the higher soul into a paravairagya where that bliss turns into something that is not owned anymore. So for a while you thought it was my bliss. In fact, witness consciousness may be a good way of saying how one all of a sudden even gets detachment or objectivity over my bliss. And when one steps back, it's sort of like saying, I'm sure happy looking at the moon. You see? But then all of a sudden you've realized that the moon is shining by the light of the sun, and you look towards a greater light. Self-effulgent, right? Moon is not self-effulgent. Sun is. Always. Ever. So that's sort of like turning away from the bliss of the ripened ego. Because when you're talking about Sananda, that's a very high ego you're talking about. It's not a low base ego or a problematic ego. It's a ripened ego. And that's all ushering in good things. All the good qualities can come when your ego is ripened. You can never get rid of it completely, Ramakrishna said, as long as you're in the body. So we should remember that little piece of information. It's going to remain. So when you see a soul, they have a personality. That is an illumined soul. Jesus, Buddha, Christ, they had their own little personalities, right? And so, but theirs were supremely ripened. That means surrendered 100% to their ideal, like the question before here. I can imagine being entirely in service to my Ishtam. So that's a very good, better than imagining, an envisionment that I am serving my Ishtam just by being here in the body. It's because I'm holding a body station, it is emanating through me. Would be a way of thinking about that, rather than stifling it somewhere, because Christ said you don't get a great light and hide it under a bushel. You bring it out for all to see. Of course, according to time and location, because you don't strew pearls before swine either. So it doesn't mean you're to be spiritual, to become a fool. Ramakrishna used to say you have to be very timely and very auspiciously aware of things. So this attachment to happiness, contentment, joy, elation, and bliss, I would say that's kind of a 5-tiered, using as many English words as I could call up, a 5-tiered station. Happiness, we know, is subject to unhappiness and sorrow, and then you get a little joy, you see, in that, and elation and so forth, and those leave a deeper mark on you. But when you get to this bliss, it really has a subdivision of two. That is, the bliss of the ripened ego and the bliss that passes all understanding, if you want to put it that way. And one is called Sampragata Samadhi, the end of Sampragata Samadhi, and the other is the beginning of Asampragata Samadhi in yoga. So Father of Yoga, Patanjali, has outlined those fairly well as stations through which consciousness moves back to its source. Takes on stations, leaves them, takes on the next one, leaves them. This is an inward ascension that's going on in consciousness. If you keep your eye on it, especially the single eye, your concentration that is, then you'll begin to know then the apparent movements of consciousness, how it takes on and gives up. Just like waking, dreaming, deep sleep again is a great mirror for that. So then when you finally reach a station of higher stations of vairagyam, this questioner is saying, there's a low state of lesser dispassion, there's a middling state of lesser dispassion, and there's a high state of lesser dispassion. And that's what he's talking about here, Vaishakara. And then there's a state of supreme dispassion that you come to, para vairagya. Para means supreme. And that supreme detachment is bliss without any attachment to it. So the ego has turned away from its, it's like it does with knowledge, you see. Sometimes it says, this is my knowledge, and my knowledge is great. I've received Gyanam from my guru, so I'm not talking about the limited knowledge of an intellectual person without any knowledge of where knowledge came from. It doesn't have any true knowledge. That's called actually aparavid and paravid. So here, it's pretty much the same thing, isn't it? Aparavairagya and paravairagya. There's lower knowledge and higher knowledge. So when you get that higher knowledge and you can give that up, then you see how attachment to bliss or to knowledge begins to leave the soul. And now it's returning to a pristine state, the original pristine state. And it can enjoy unalloyed, uninterrupted bliss and non-dual Brahmagyan. And you could call that Prema Bhakti or you could call it Brahmagyan, depending on which temperament you're talking about there. The one who loves formlessness or the one who loves form. Or the one who mixes them up and goes from one to the other in complete knowledge. Like, that's a beautiful teaching that Sri Ramakrishna used to say, sometimes you see a full moon in the sky, and other times you see the sun. But sometimes, on certain days, you can see both sun and moon in the same sky. That's beautiful, you see it. Pretty much exactly, in a very simple way, shows how Brahmagyan, the deepest non-dual wisdom, and Prema Bhakti, the most ecstatic love, are there in this one person who can go from form to formlessness and remove all distinctions that would get in the way of full realization. And that would be called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or if you're talking in Vedanta, if you're talking in yoga, it's called Asampragyata, the seedless Samadhi. It's only one of those. But the seated Samadhis, there's quite a few. And then there's a whole bunch of moods too, bhavas and so forth, that are underpinnings, you see, to all of those moods too, all of those samadhis. So only one of that non-dual samadhi, very beautiful thing there. So I hope that explains a little bit the technical aspect of this question and also gets to the heart of it, that one can lose attachment to bliss, because remember, Father of Yoga also said, that's the fourth of four impediments is attachment to bliss, attachment to subtle bliss. And that he's talking about that sasmita sananda connection where you're enjoying your bliss very much, thank you. And my students come up to me and they say, I'd sure like some of that. I wouldn't mind that. I'll take that. But then, like anything else, until you reach the non-dual, which is the only thing which will fulfill you and satisfy, called knowing yourself, you're knowing something that's only a part of yourself, an attribute of yourself. It'd be like, say, a Christmas tree standing there and saying, I sure like that particular ornament on me. You see? Or, I like that I'm green. But it's the essence of the treeness of it. It's missing, you see. So that's what they say fulfills you completely when you have that non-dual experience. Until then, bliss is a good secondary thing, you see. But eventually it may become something you're going to want to transcend. Father of Yoga thinks so. So, that's a little bit about that. Now, you have said in the past that Vedanta will make a Christian a better Christian, a Catholic a better Catholic, a Muslim a better Muslim. What exactly do you mean by this? Well, actually, I didn't say that. I said a Christian a better Christian, a Jew a better Jew, a Muslim a better Muslim, and a Hindu a better Hindu. Because actually Catholics are Christians. So, but actually that's a very interesting point. What can make a Christian a Catholic a better Christian? See, is a good point. When he starts accepting his Protestant brothers and sisters, that is, when both Catholics and Protestants drop the divisions between one religion and begin seeing that they are worshippers and lovers of Christ. Simply put, you don't go to church and then go to war. That was not Christ's way. You renounce the world and you follow him, don't you? So what are all these things we're putting in the way of true love of Jesus, true worship of Jesus, that we could really call ourselves Christians? Because we here are Vedantists. We've had to look somewhere else for the wisdom tradition part that was missing in Christendom. And there was a lot else missing in Christendom too, we found. Well, a lot of Hindus have left India because there was a lot missing in Hinduism to them. And that's why Vivekananda came forth with the Vedanta, because what I mean to say when I say Vedanta will make a Christian a better Christian, a Muslim a better Muslim, and a Hindu a better Hindu, is that it will give you that non-dual part that is so impinging on the wisdom part of the tradition. If you take wisdom away from devotion, then devotion becomes sentimental, becomes emotional, becomes half of what a caricature of itself. We can see that happening everywhere. You don't see jnanis walking around the churches very often, you see. And you don't even see ecstatic Ramakrishnas walking around churches, do you? Well, that's because Vivekananda said it's good to be born in a church, but don't die in a church. Because the churches of today are not giving us the wisdom part of the tradition. That's why we are going east for it. India has it in spades. China has it because of Buddhism mainly, but also because of Taoism and so forth. Confucianism had a lot of wisdom in it. So these other traditions from the Near East and Far East are very key, and Christianity was from the Middle East, you see. So if we want to follow it exactly, we're going to have to look at Christ's teachings and remake him in our mind. See, we've unmade him, so we have to remake him in our mind. He never changes. He is the consciousness that is doing the remaking, see. So we man him up in our minds and we see him as he was. A sannyasin like Vivekananda in modern times, just wandering free with no religion attached to him. These are things we have to keep in mind if we want to really be Vedantas, and so that Vedanta will, as it boasts, rightly so, make a Hindu a better Hindu and a Christian a better Christian and a Muslim a better Muslim. Because specifically to answer the question, it's not a religion. It's a way of living God. It is the living God, Vedanta. All love, you see. That's the gist of our Vedanta. It's not just compassion where you say, oh, you poor suffering people in another country or something. It's rolling up your sleeves and saying, you're my very soul. I want to go help you. See, so back to this question. I want to be the best kind of example. I want to worship my Ishtam. I want to do altruistic action and so forth. That would be doing it in the Vedantic way. You see, that I'm the Atman, and the Atman is there too. Atman is Atman. See, is there any help there? Can the soul help itself? It's all one being, so it's no credit to you that you stand up and help your brothers. It's just enjoined upon you to do so because that's your very self that you're helping. Those are great non-dual axioms that are brought home very close to our heart when we actually engage in meditation and action, or wisdom and devotion. We start to integrate these four yogas. So, yes, Vedanta and has proven to us in the West already, amidst many thousands of us now, that Vedanta is true to its boast, true to its pledge, that we'll make better Christians of it. Because we return to the real Christ when we study the Vedanta. Try reading Sermon on the Mount, according to Vedanta. It's a beautiful book by one Hindu Swami that came here and manned a station in Los Angeles for a while, Swami Prabhavananda. So, those kinds of books, Christ and the Oriental Ideal, is another one that returns us to our original look at the Christ and how he came from the Middle East and so forth, and what he stood for, really. So these are things that are set in stone in time. Time has a good side to it. Those things that are set in stone in time have been set there by those great masons, see, the great avatars. They're the best with the hammer and chisel of truth. They'll impress those things upon us very deeply, and it behooves us, yes, but it also isn't very hard for us to look back and find those axioms engraved in stone, in the stone of our consciousness, flowing in letters of molten gold across the inner terrain of our consciousness, as the Muslims put it in the Quran, you see, like letters of molten gold. You'll see them there if you look. It's the truth, staring you right in the face. You don't need to, and you shouldn't, cover it up by a bunch of half-truths or outright fallacies. See? That's not religion. We want to bring back religion with a capital R, Vivekananda said, not with the small r anymore. So, a little bit of about that. And if there's another 5 minutes or so, we say, there is another question here, most likely. Did Swami Vivekananda favor Vedanta and the path of Jnana Yoga more so than Sri Ramakrishna? And does the answer depend on whether we are considering Swamiji's dealings with Eastern or Western disciples? Well, of course, we have that old adage, which really holds true, that Ramakrishna was a Bhakta outside and a Jnani inside, and Vivekananda was the other way around. You see, he was a Jnani outside and a Bhakta inside. When his English disciples saw him in India for the first time, that is, he was, they saw him first in America and in England, and he was dressed fine, and in his frock and everything, and his Swami clothes, and he was, when you go to Rome, be like the Romans, do like the Romans do. He was like that way in America. He went back to his own country, and they saw him. Then they saw the bhakti side come out of him. So he rolling around in the dirt and crying out his master's name and stuff, around the Duni fire at night in a dhoti cloth. You see, they'd never seen that before. They didn't see that side of Vivekananda. Mm-hmm. So you have those kinds of stories about him, so yes, generally speaking, he would take account of his Eastern and Western disciples and the cultures, even if they weren't his disciples, the cultures. But specifically, no. Specifically, it's a matter of temperament. There are temperaments of every kind in every different culture and country, so you can't generalize it too much. So you say, yes, I brought Vedanta to the West. He said, I looked at all the darshanas, including yoga and so forth, and Samkhya. What I brought was the Vedanta because they were pink with Rajas and Sattva. They were turning red to white. They were pink, you see. So they were intellectual, he's saying. So the best thing for them would be to get the Vedanta. But look how it's happening, so slowly, so gradually. The underground river of Vedanta, we call it, happening very slowly. Yes, many of the Westerners and England and English are intellectuals, but not all of them. There are just as many that are running towards Sri Ramakrishna and saying, I want the bhakti path, I want the bhakti path. Can I dance and sing and be in ecstasy like you? That sounds fun. I think I'll spend my life doing that. Come to find it's not so easy as all that, is it? So, maybe to end the satsang here and to end this question, bring up the teaching of King Janaka, or the example of King Janaka. Sri Ramakrishna said he drank his milk from a brimming cup. See, That is, he had everything. He was a king, he had riches, he had lands, he had wives, he had, subjects. But the only thing he wanted to do was spend time in his study reading books about Atmagyan, you see, and talking with the priests and everything about God, see. That was where he really liked to spend his time. So he drank his milk from a brimming cup, you see. So people read that in the gospel and say, yeah, I want to be like King Janaka, I want to have it all. And, so Sri Ramakrishna kind of laughed at that a little bit, you see, the naivety of it. He says, yes, but did you know that before King Janaka got it all, that, he was really very studious. He did his sadhana, he did his practice, and then after he attained kingship and lordship over all the lands and peoples and everything, he still wanted to spend time just studying. As if the duties of kingship were sort of onerous and, weighty, too heavy. There have been many cases in Hindu scriptures, the itihasa is called, of kings who didn't want to become kings. And wise men forced it on them. No, you must, because you'll be able to pass the teachings on through the example of being a good king. How about that for a change? Let's have a good ruler. Let's have a spiritual ruler, not one who dominates. And we hear enough about that, you see, especially in the media. But what about all those great leaders and rulers who passed on, like Ashoka when Buddhism came through India, you see? Well, let's take another look at animal sacrifice. Let's take another look at vegetarianism. Let's change things up a little bit here and make people more refined in their appetites. See? Well, that's the turn towards jnanam. It's the turn towards intellectual. That's the turn towards living in the mind rather than in the body. So all of those thoughts, insights that come pouring out in regard to that kind of idea that bhakti and jnanam has to be fused. You say that if you just leave it in that terrain, you see that, oh yeah, he was a jnani outside, bhakti inside and so forth. But you leave action and meditation sort of out of the picture. But Vivekananda's real focus was on the foresighted, the well-rounded disciple. He wanted all four of those yogas. He said, I've met many people who are one-sided and two-sided. I'm tired of them all. So even if you had two sides together, he didn't really like that. He wasn't satisfied. He wanted you to form all four yogas. You know what we mean by the four great yogas? Jnanam, wisdom, bhakti, devotion, meditation, called dhyanam or raja yoga, and karma yoga. And karma yoga is that yoga that tests them all and comes full circle. You bring Brahman back into the world through your actions. And your actions become very, very non-egotistical and non-grasping and full of non-agency. Everything is non about it, you see, when you have tested your actions in the fire of meditation, which is its opposite, action and inaction. And also brought the scriptures in, like one question says here. And also definitely don't chase bhakti out of the picture. See, just because bhakti has a tendency to just become sentimental if it isn't grounded in wisdom. This is the point. You must integrate them all and become a well-rounded devotee. Then, as you say, what can I call myself? Good things to call yourself are a lover of God, a devotee. One of the best things you can call yourself. Another good thing is a practitioner of the Dharma. You see. So there are many beautiful titles, short of being an avatar or even an enlightened seer, that you can aspire to in this lifetime, to make great spiritual progress through that. And you'll find out that they're going to incorporate all four of those personalities: the contemplative person, the studious person, the active person, and the intellectual person. So a good final question there to end with for this week's satsang. We will be back in about 4 or 5 weeks here in Hawaii with more satsangs. Please do join us for the class this afternoon, which has a lot about these questions. It's very timely these questions came at this particular day, because today's class is going to wrap up our Advaita series. It's called Non-Touch Yoga or Advaita Yoga. And a lot of the charts I'm using today and the teachings I'll be transmitting today have to do with these very questions. So join us at 2:30 Hawaii time and other time zones as they apply to your area. And we will then close here with a chant. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your beautiful questions. Om Sato Ma Sat Gamoya, Tamaso Ma Joitir Gamoya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya, Abhira Mayeti, Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukam, Tenamam Pahinicham, Om Shanti 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 Hi. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.